September 12th in 2009. We're in Chicago, Illinois, right at the beginning of the Page Society Fall Conference. I'm sitting with Peter Debreceny, and I think we'd like to start talking probably about your early career, and let's talk about its development. Following your graduation from college and through your current work as a consultant for Gage and McDonald, how did you land here? You began with a degree in political science and public administration. Tell us how you got here.
Okay. Well, my first job out of college, or even while I was still in college, actually, I was working for the equivalent of the New Zealand State Department, so the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in New Zealand, which is where I'm from, and I was helping overseas students who'd come to the country under scholarships from Asia and Africa with their adjustment to the society, with their academic training. I was their case officer, if you like, while they were in the country. So, and it was a great job, and I met a lot of really interesting people from different parts of the world. But pretty quickly, a job became available in the New Zealand Broadcasting Corporation, which at the time was the only radio and television broadcaster in the country. And it was at the height of the Vietnam War, or actually early, I guess, in the Vietnam War. There was a lot of protest. A friend of mine who worked for broadcasting had organized a conference. The government, which owned the broadcasting system at the time, wasn't very happy about the fact he'd done this because they were in favor of the war, he was opposed. So he lost his job, and he said, "Why don't you apply for my job?" So I was one of the applicants, and I was lucky enough to get the job. So I moved from being a Foreign Affairs, a State Department equivalent officer to being a broadcast journalist. And I did radio and television, first radio, then television current affairs. A program a bit like All Things Considered in the afternoons. We did a half-hour show every evening, which was live show on usually the political topics and economic topics of the day, both in New Zealand and around the world. And we would interview people. So Marvin Kalb, who was a really well-known CBS reporter at the time, was our person in the US, and we would call him in the evening and our time and get his sense of what was going on in the US, for example, people like that. And then in television, a program like 60 Minutes, but again, live current affairs program that was on 3 times a week, where I was one of the on-air talent doing film stories and in-studio interviews. And so I did that for a while, and then I decided to move into PR, which is like a lot of folks in my generation. You were a journalist one day and you were a PR person the next. So one day I went from receiving press releases, and the next day I was writing them and sending them out. So I started an agency in New Zealand. I went to work for a client eventually. While I was at that firm, I was running marketing and public relations for this particular building company. Spent a couple of years in the US early in my career in Ohio as the US representative of the company around the export of its technology to the United States. Then went back to an advertising agency in New Zealand, where I ran the public relations division inside an advertising agency. So I got a very early taste of what integrated communication was all about. We had a even today would be regarded as a very modern approach in terms of no matter what the business issue that the client or prospective client had, we would approach it from an integrated, holistic communications point of view. Again, went to work for a client, this time a very prominent New Zealand investment bank. Spent some time, we ended up sponsoring several New Zealand America's Cup challenges, so I spent some time in Australia, involved with the total marketing and sponsorship around the first New Zealand America's Cup challenge, and then in the US in San Diego for the second challenge, so as well as running the marketing around the financial part of what the bank was doing, also the sporting part. It was our money that everybody was using, so we thought we'd run it as well. Stayed on in the US as a consultant. I've lived in lots of different parts of the country. Got headhunted back to New Zealand to run an agency, then to Australia for Edelman, and Edelman brought me to Chicago. And when I was at Edelman Chicago, I was hired by Allstate as Vice President of Corporate Relations at Allstate, and I was there for 9 years, retired a couple of years ago. And since then, after a little bit of an interregnum, started doing some consulting work with Merrill, McDonald, and bit by bit have got busier and busier, and now I'm back full-time being a consultant with Gage McDonald. So a pretty checkered career. I think the great thing when I look back about my career is I've had the opportunity to be involved in this profession in different countries, New Zealand, Australia, and here in the US. Half of it has been inside corporate environments and half inside agency environments. And I've had the good fortune, particularly because I started in New Zealand really early in the profession's history in that country. So you don't specialize, or you didn't then, and still not so much, because it's a very small market. So I got to do everything: sports sponsorship, art sponsorship, fast-moving consumer goods, mergers and acquisition, investor relations, annual reports, corporate communications, writing. Like I used to take the press releases down to the paper in the middle of the night, so that actually hand it to the reporter and then walk down to get the story liner typed. So I feel really pleased that I've been able to get that very eclectic mix of what this business is about, because what you learn in one part of it, I think you can really apply it to the different parts of it. And my sense is in the US maybe we specialize too quickly. You come out of school, you maybe get a year under your belt in an agency, sometimes even just as an intern, and then suddenly now I'm in healthcare, and I'm going to be in healthcare forever. I think it's too quick.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that I haven't covered or you haven't covered? And this will be on our website. There'll be future generations who may take a listen and a look-see and say,
sure. So this is the most amazing time to be starting off in this profession right now. This profession is in a state of complete revolution, and we don't really see where the revolution is going to take us. But if you think about some of the themes in the authentic enterprise, globalization, new stakeholder groups being empowered in ways that they never have before, the impact of technology, 1 billion cell phones sold a year, still in today's climate, most of them now with cameras, and now increasingly video cameras and data links. So each year there's 1 billion new publishers, television stations being created, and radio stations and newspapers being created. So the impact on what we do, it's clear that we are no longer in control, if we ever were, of the message. I don't think we ever were, but we like to think we were. Not anymore. So there's this revolution happening where we are even more important than we've ever been in terms of the contribution that the profession can make to society and to the businesses and organizations that we serve or work for. And there's a whole new world of the profession just waiting to be built. And if you're starting in the profession today, because all the ground rules have gone, and the environment in which we've been operating since Arthur Page's time is shifting underneath our feet. And so we can create a new vision of the profession and a new way that we work and a new ability to deliver value. And the people coming into the profession now are the people who are going to do that. Right? So us old fogies, our day has gone. It's the revolution that's happening now that the new people can come into. And the interesting thing about it is, if you look at the principles, the Arthur Page principles, which the society, the founders, many of whom are very much associated with the center, that they codified 26 years ago when the organization began, the sayings of Arthur Page into the Page principles. So they're ideas that he had that are 60 years old, or longer, 80 years old, right? They're more valid and more true and more relevant today than they ever were. And if you think about what's happening in this unknown, uncharted territory that we're all in, but if you look at the Page Principles, and if you follow the Page Principles, you've got a guiding compass to go by. They're really powerful and really relevant. And I'm just fascinated by the way that these ideas that he had back then, every day and every week and every year get more powerful and more relevant than before.
Wow, very good.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was wonderful.